Story 1. My wife hates my mom so much she can't stand being around her. What can I do? Hey guys, as the title suggests, I'm in a pretty tough situation that I'm not quite sure how to handle. I will attempt to be as brief as possible, so please bear with me too long. 31. Male, have a wife. 33. Female. Married 4.5 years together for 6 years. Who absolutely hates my mom. 59. Female. So much she can't be in the same room as her. Here's the backstory. My wife and I had our son a little over 3 years ago. To put it lightly, the pregnancy was not easy. In the first trimester, some abnormalities were found during one of her routine checkups, and more labs were done to figure out what was going on. After several weeks and being told numerous times that our baby will have a multitude of health problems, such as severe autism, heart complications, a short lifespan and pain, we were told to consider aborting the pregnancy. My wife and I were devastated with this news, but decided to dig a little deeper on some possibilities of what could potentially be going on with our son before we made our decision going forward. We found in our research, thank you Google, that during pregnancies, if the fetus develops any heart abnormalities, lab results will show a significant number of false positives for other abnormalities and health defects. This can be confirmed in the second trimester with a lab drawn directly from the baby through a procedure, but the risk is an instant termination of the pregnancy. We decided to go for that one shot. And fast forward a couple months, the procedure was done safely, and we were eventually told that our son has a congenital heart disease called hypoplastic right heart syndrome, along with a few other small issues within his heart. My wife and I were terrified to say the least, but so happy that it was the only issue, and everything else was a false positive. Here's where the issues with my mom began. My wife is generally a very private person and does not like her business out in the open, so we decided to tell our immediate families only and explicitly told them, under no circumstances, that they say anything to anyone else. I probably repeated this about 100 times to my mom, as her family is very open. They tell each other everything, strike one. Well, in a roundabout way, my mom makes a Facebook post asking everyone for payments for me and my wife. In her eyes, she kept her promise and didn't say anything and was harmless and only asking for prayer. Well, the result of that was our phones. And social media was blowing up now, asking if everything is okay, what was going on, and if we needed any help. This understandably stressed the hell out of my wife and made us furious. Although I understand my mom did it, it infuriated me because it directly went against what I told her and put my wife, who was already under enormous stress, to be even more stressed out while I tried to shield her as much as I could. My mother's apology was, "I don't think I did anything wrong, but I'm sorry." My mom did this my entire life, so I was used to it and just avoided situations like this with her. But as you can probably guess, my wife, not so much. Eventually, we got past this and moved on. Strike two, fast forward, my son is now born and underwent his first heart surgery, and he wasn't even 2 months old. While in recovery, my mom was visiting. My wife would not leave my son's bedside, and her entire focus was on him. It's all she can think about. My mom started crying, said she was leaving in a frustrated tone, and walked out. I, confused, followed her out and asked what was going on, and she told me that my wife was being cold, ignoring her, and not talking to her. So she walked out and was going to leave. I had to lay into her, saying that our baby just had heart surgery and is laying in a hospital bed right now. Of course, my wife isn't going to talk to anyone. She's barely keeping it together herself, and I was furious she was making the situation about herself. Eventually, mom left, and I went back to my son's room. My mom made a big scene with my family and made it out so that she was the victim in how she was being treated. I again had to do damage control and shield my wife from all of this, trying to be the middleman between my family and my wife. Eventually, my mom apologized, but in the exact same manner she did before. I don't know what I did wrong. My feelings were hurt as well, but I'm sorry if I hurted her. Dear God, was I livid? And again, eventually we got past this and moved on. Strike three, and the main reason she can't be around my mom. 3.5 years later, my wife struggled through purified protein derivative anxiety insecurities due to having Bell's palsy and other health issues. Due to all of the stress we went through with my son, not knowing if he'd make it past 1 year old, my wife opened up to me about something that nearly broke me. She tells me that after my son's second open heart surgery, when my mom was staying with us, trying to help around the house, while I was at work one day and they were alone together, my mom told her she doesn't think that she's a good mom, that she doesn't deserve me as her husband, etc., because she can't keep the house clean. She keeps my son exposed to all of the animals in our house. We have more now. But at the time, 2 cats, 2 dogs, bearded dragon. My wife told me this broke her. And for the past 3 years, she believed her and was the main reason for her depression and anxiety. My wife tells me she used to be so strong and a badass. She still is in my eyes. But because of everything that she went through with my son, she was in such a vulnerable state, she couldn't fight back. I was furious to say the least and told her, we're cutting my mom out and going, no contact with her from now on. This made my wife happy and honestly lifted a huge burden from her shoulders and told me no. This surprised me and didn't know what to say. She told me that as long as I believed her, that's all she cared about and didn't want to take grandparents away from my son, because they are in fact good grandparents to my son. For a little context, over the last 3 years, this was one of the big things I argued with my parents, who live so far away and hardly ever visited. Their reasoning was because of work and financial constraints. I always offered to pay for their plane tickets or gas, but to just come visit their grandson. Father is completely blind and amputee, so he can't make the trip by himself. At the time, I knew the relationship was strained between my wife and mom, but did not know it was to this extent. And my wife always told me she was okay with them visiting, as long as she didn't have to really deal with my mom. But now that my wife dropped this truth bomb on me, I have no idea how to navigate this situation. It's been a couple months since she told me, and each time we're getting ready to see my mom, I can see my wife begin to go back to that shell of hers, and she wants to get away to the point where she tells me when they come to visit, she won't be in the house, understandable, but what about holidays? Birthdays, special events, regular visits? I want my family, wife, and son to be together during these times, but my wife is now telling me she can't be around my mom, not even in the same building as her. But she doesn't want me to tell anyone what's going on and doesn't want me to cut her off because she doesn't want my son to grow up without his grandparents from my side. No one else knows about this situation, but everyone knows that my wife and mom don't really get along because it's pretty obvious. But that's it. So if I were to come out and say anything, it becomes my wife's word versus my mom's. As this occurred over 3 years ago, I 100% believe my wife and will support her in any way I possibly can, but I have no idea how I'm going to handle this. I expressed this to her many times as well, that the only way this would work is if she would at least be cordial with my mom and just tolerate her and know that no matter what, I will always side with you. I know I can lie and give excuses about my wife not being there, here and there, but that will only get me so far and won't really work for major holidays or my son's B-day eventually. I'll run out of excuses and people will begin to ask what's going on and why my wife is never around. I've suggested couples and individual therapy to help her find ways to manage her hatred and make this easier, and she's open to the idea but hasn't gone yet. Also, the reason I can't just cut off my mom anymore is because she takes care of my father, who relies on her heavily for everything. So then my dad would be cut off, who has done nothing wrong. So Reddit, how would you handle this situation between my wife and my mom? If anyone has dealt with something similar to my wife, do you have any advice for her that would be helpful? Thanks, too long, didn't read. My son was born with a heart condition that required 2 heart surgeries before turning 1-year-old. And when I was at work during my wife's most vulnerable mental state, my mom told her she wasn't a good mom, didn't deserve me as a husband, and is a terrible wife. Wife believed it for almost 4 years, worsening her purified protein derivative at the time, causing anxiety, worsening insecurities, and overall decline in mental and physical health. Before she finally told me what happened, I wanted to go. No contact with my mom, but my wife was happy. I believed her and lifted a huge burden from her shoulders, but doesn't want me to cut her off because she doesn't want to cut out both grandparents from my son's life, since my father relies heavily on my mom due to being completely blind and an amputee. Story: 2 dads. I think I hate my wife. I keep telling myself it will get better. It does. But then out of nowhere, she is the most manic, illogical person I've ever seen. We have a 9-week-old. The first 3 weeks, it was very evident she had some baby blues. Things would be okay, but then they get really bad again. This morning, she stormed around the house at 4 a.m., not because the baby was up, no, but because I wanted to put the baby to bed 30 minutes early last night to catch some extra sleep while the baby was already sleeping. Our baby has been pretty consistent with sleeping 6 to 8 hours a night for the past few weeks. I figure, okay, he's asleep at 8 instead of 9. I'm going to go to bed at 8 to maximize my sleep as well. No, I'm controlling, trying to break routine, and apparently gaslighting her. Now, gaslighting being a term she has never used ever until today. I work from home. And honestly, even though I am just upstairs in my home office game room, I look forward to work. I look forward to getting away from her. Not the child, just her. I can't. Leave the house, play games, go to bed, watch a movie or shows. I like without her bitching about it. Sorry for using that word, but that's exactly what it is. I've regressed into myself and don't really talk much. I didn't even try to play some video games yesterday after work, for fear it would start an argument. My favorite days are when she leaves to go see her mom or go to the store, and it is just me and the kid. It's easy. We get to do what we want without being yelled at. Sorry for the rant. I don't have a great support system on my side of things. So I internalize a lot of crap. And so here I am, edit, we've been together 10 years. And the way she is acting is definitely post baby hell, 3 days after the baby. She said things like, "We're not going to make it." Edit 2. Wow, this thing blew up. I'm off work and will try to respond where I can. Firstly, the criticism on the gaming yesterday sentence. I worded the sentence poorly. It is written to sound like I have only missed 1 day of gaming, me time, which is not true. I was merely providing a recent example. Related to hobbies and personal time, my game time has been reduced to 2 or 3 hours per week if I'm lucky. Secondly, those calling me lazy and saying I don't help the lady out are flat wrong in their assumption. Yes, I left those details out and admittedly should have included them. But I was tired and emotional this morning and just wrote a post on what I was feeling at that time. I help out in every way I can. I wish I could breastfeed as well, so I could help there. But sadly, the 1 to 3 bottles per week I can get while the lady is busy is all. We try to exclusively breastfeed. I come downstairs from work and offer any help I can. I do 75% of the diaper change and all the burping, holding, post feeding that I can. While not working, I cook, I clean. So please stop with the assumptions of me being a lazy dad. If anything, a large part of my initial rant was because I do a lot, but do not ever feel appreciated for said work. Thirdly, after writing this post and taking our kid in for his first shots today, I went downstairs to her after some work meetings and hugged her, told her, let's go to therapy, but also let's talk about what each other was feeling. We talked for about 3 hours. We've done this before in some capacity, so I can say I expect things to change. I mean, she essentially hinted as much when we were kind of winding down. She decided to insult me 2 or 3 times, making most of the discussion we had feel unworthy. My biggest fear right now is raising our son. I want another kid or two in a broken or divorced home.